Good morning, Ruth-Ann Thorn.
Good morning. So good to be here.
Wow. I've had Sergio tell me that about you, that, you're, first of all, an artist and own a gallery and all this type of stuff. And you're definitely in the local community for, I don't know what to call Native Indian.
Yes, so right? I'm Native American from one of the local tribes here in San Diego.
That is really, really interesting for me because I'm not from here. So this is fascinating for me. I find this interesting. The local, you know what? Before we do that, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm from the Rincon tribe here in San Diego. And so I think it's kind of funny. A lot of times people don't know that much about Native Americans, even though we've been here longer than this country has ever existed. So we've been here for 23,000 years documented.
How many years? 30?
23,000 years documented.
Goodness. Well, what's the story that they came through the Bering Strait, right? Is that the story?
Well, I think there's several different stories. In our own culture, our story is that we are aliens, that we come from the stars. So we're the star people, which is, you never know. I mean, right. I think the more we're finding out about science and the universe, these things may be actually true.
I'll go with it. Yeah. Okay, keep going. What is the difference in the San Diego, this part of America versus, I don't know, north of Canada and down south in Brazil and is there a difference?
I think there's a difference in, the culture, obviously, and even in the culture in the United States. Mm-hmm. There are 537 federally recognized tribes still in existence today. But at one time, there were 100 million people on this northern continent.
Right.
I think the indigenous tribes globally, because when you really break it down way back, even your people, my people, we were all tribal at one point.
Oh, some people still are.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what I always say? It wasn't probably until somebody made somebody king that it went from the circular leadership where we as human beings worked together as a tribe, where everybody was created in an idea that there were different giftings from every single person to one person is more important than everybody else.
Right.
And that's where that pyramid kind of idea, the kings and queens on top, and then the next people. And by the time you get to the bottom, those people are actually not that valuable. And that really was the shift that happened when, somebody came up with a monarchy system opposed to this tribal community.
Are you saying that even what are the two biggest tribes that were here? Not tribes, but like cultures. Aztec? Right?
Well, I think when you get down to South America, you have the Mayan, you have the Aztec. But here on the northern plain, there were many different tribes. There were so many people and there were a lot of variety. So in California, where we are right now, we have the Kumeyaay Nation, which is still in existence. Our nation, which is Luceño, but our actual traditional name is Peocoichim. And we were all coastal people. And then that went all the way up to Los Angeles, where you have the Tongva people. You go up north, Chumash. So what's important about the West Coast is that we had probably the strongest relationships with people from all around the world because of the trade routes.
Right. Interesting. What's the difference between the let's say, your people from here? When you say from here, do you mean Tijuana, Mexico, this whole region? Is that what you mean? What do you mean from here?
Yeah, so
where exactly?
Before, obviously, the borders were here.
Right.
The Kumeyaay people went all the way down into Mexico, really south. We're a little bit more north, my people, so we would be all the way out in the desert, even close to Palm Springs, to the ocean, up to Catalina, out to the Channel Islands. So these were not areas that anybody felt like they particularly owned. They were just territories that people lived in. Because in Native tradition, we don't believe you can own the land. So you didn't ever own it. You actually were part of it. And that, I think, is a really interesting idea, to be part of something bigger than yourself, that you are part of an ecosystem. So as as the human race, we always looked at ourselves as equal to our animal relatives, to the plants, to the water that we believe is living and actually has knowledge of where to go.
Of course. We already proved this today. We know that. We know that already for a fact. Interestingly, so but when you say that they own no land, nobody owns the land, but they still were in certain areas and they fought each other even
sometimes
for the areas, right?
It depends on the areas that you were at. So in California, we were pretty much a peace-loving group. We were not warriors because look at this place. You don't really have to fight too much to have a good life, right? Right. I think we were actually the original surfers. Probably. We were chilling. But I mean, truthfully, we are nomadic people. So we would go from the mountains through the desert to the ocean, and we moved traditionally every 2 months. And so that was we follow an 8-season calendar because we would go where the plants and the animals were to hunt and to fish and to do all of that. So we adapted ourselves to the way that nature was reflecting itself with growth. That's a very different concept from the way the colonies came over and taught
agricultural
something.
Kind of like
farming.
Farming. Yeah, that's a different. Yeah, I get it. It's I often think about this. I think that if you ask me what's the ideal lifestyle, I would say you got to keep moving. It makes sense to me, that concept which you just expressed. This is why people you see they're like, we're tired of this in our house. Let's change this and let's change this because we need change. And it's a natural recurring thing. Water flows, it goes from river to ocean, and etc. Right? And I think human beings are also like that. And the whole, I don't want to say nomadic concept, but I don't know what do you even call that when you, as a people, when you move like that? What is that called? Well, is there a name for it?
I don't know if there was really a name. I mean, I think it was just nobody really thought about it because it was just common sense. You needed to go where the food was growing and where the animals were. And part of that was the idea that you were so in touch with nature that you were conforming to nature. You weren't asking nature to conform to you. Mm-hmm. So we have a very different concept about that. But I think what you're talking about is really more the creativity of who we are as human beings, is the need to come up with new ideas and to work those ideas and see them come to fruition. And that's what I think we get that cue from nature, because when you think about a seed and it goes into the ground, it has an idea. It has actually a thought process within that seed. Some people would call it a program. That it is going to, it's born to do that thing. Mm-hmm. And it keeps moving. And I think as human beings, when we're happiest is when we're challenging ourselves and we're coming up with new ideas and exciting things to do. Right. Okay. So where are they located now, most of these, local, where are they now? Well, they're here. And a lot of people always say to me, how come I don't see any Native people? Well, we were pushed out onto reservations. And a lot of times people who live on the reservations, they actually don't leave because they're still dealing with generational trauma. So that's a real thing. But here in San Diego, we have more tribes in this concentrated area than anywhere else in the United States. Really? We have 18 federally recognized tribes. And I should be able to name them all, but I know some of them. What does that mean? Here's some things that I know. I know that there are reservations that they live in, and there's some kind of a I don't know what it's called, deal that they have with the government. Right. And I know that they open casinos. I'm trying to figure out what is the lifestyle. I mean, do they go and open regular businesses and pay taxes, not pay taxes? How does this work? Well, you have to go back. So you have to have a little bit of the history lesson. Right. So when the Spaniards came to California, because every area in the United States was colonized by a different group of people. Mm-hmm. Here in San Diego, in LA, it was mostly the Spaniards that came. And this was a slow process. So they didn't just arrive on our shores one day and say, hey, we're taking everything over. It was a slow process. And this started even in the 1500s, the idea of scouting out areas and this, what I call hostile takeover. But by the 1800s, that's when things got really started to heat up. And this is when the missions were built, all by Native Americans. So by that time, Native Americans had been enslaved. And so the Catholic Church came over.
The churches were built by the natives?
Oh, yeah. Every single brick that is laid in every single mission in California was laid by a Native American, not by a Spaniard. And that is a fact.
Interesting.
So they were enslaved, and then, you know, there were these ideas. I mean, there were uproarings there were fights, and people were killed, and priests were killed, and the natives were killed. I mean, it wasn't an easy overtaking, but eventually the
what
government
did they overtake? I mean, you're saying that
all the land. I mean, they took over the ability to rule over this land.
Right. So you couldn't move the way you could move before.
Oh, you couldn't move at all. You were considered a savage. So that was built into when the Declaration of Independence was signed, 4 days later, the Indian Removal Act was signed. So that declaration was created for white people that were coming over from Europe. It was never intended for the Native Americans.
Right.
And it says very specifically if you look at the way that a Native American has been, the narrative about our people is that we are merciless Indian savages. So the whole idea was that we needed to be saved by the church, and they needed to beat the Indian out of us in order to save our souls. And so the whole manifest destiny came over with the idea that God had given permission to the settlers to come over and take over the land in the name of God. And this is always something that happens in history, right? This happened here. And so my great-grandfather was born in the 1890s, and he was ripped out of my great-grandmother's arms and put to a school, which was a re-indoctrination school. It still stands today. It's in Riverside. It's called Sherman Institute. Now they've changed it to Sherman Indian School. But this is where they literally beat the Indian out of you, put you as children in work camps, and sent you back home when you were about 18, where you no longer spoke the language, you had a Christian name, and they wanted to reform you. So at that time, the reservations were created. So it's kind of a deep past when you think about it's a heavy subject.
You mentioned before about trauma, and I'm curious about it because more from a personal perspective for the native. Is that how do you call yourself? What do you call yourself?
Well, we call ourselves Native American.
Native American. Okay.
With the within the society, we call each other Indians because we are reclaiming that.
Got it. Okay. So for the, I don't know if I could say average Indian.
Yes.
Do they have an internal conflict of who they are? Because obviously there was the Spanish and the mixture of the races or whatever you want to call that. And today, are they conflicted? Are they like saying, oh man, are we here? Are we there? What are we? Do you feel that or not really?
Absolutely. I call it living in between two worlds. And it's really an interesting thing because even if you didn't grow up with the traditions and you didn't grow up on the reservation, that DNA is so deeply entrenched because the land that we step foot on every day is the land that our ancestors are literally born in,
right,
and have died to this land. And so when you think about any group of people, including, where are you from?
Everywhere, but we're genetically, I guess we're Jews from Uzbekistan, and anyway, we moved a lot.
Have you ever been back to the old country that you were from originally?
I don't know what my old country is. I guess Israel.
Okay.
Because it's Judeo-Sumeria back then. I don't know where does it start. Where do you start?
Okay.
I guess if I look at my DNA, it is Mesopotamia, which is that region. That's what it says on my DNA test anyway. 99% from city of Ur, where Abraham is from. Right. That's what it says.
Have you ever been there?
Yeah, I've been to the whole region.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. I lived in Israel for a few years, but yeah.
So I guess my question is to you is, when you were there, did you feel any connection to the space, to the land? Because, science has shown us that our DNA has memory.
Yes.
And that memory is because we are our ancestors. When we talk about praying to the ancestors, a lot of people think, oh, that's just a spiritual idea. And that's a global idea of praying to our ancestors, asking our ancestors for wisdom. But when you really think about it from a scientific point of view,
yes.
It's because the DNA of thousands of people, we are the result of that. So their wisdom, their memory, everything that they have gone through,
it's instilled in us.
It's instilled in us.
The question is, where do you start?
So I think
which period?
Yes, I mean, for us, it's not that far removed, because when you think about it, this country hasn't even been here for 300 years.
Oh,
so we are the original people. Yeah. So our roots to this land it's so deep.
It's deep, yeah. It's 9,000 years.
And it's really recent, actually. So your question about, are we feeling like we're almost displaced? It's more that we feel like a lot of the traditions that we were so connected with the land, with the animals, with the plants, that memory is coming back for the first time, because it was pushed down with our people for so long. We weren't even able to speak the language. Now we have language classes coming back. We're doing basket making. We're going back to the things that were done for thousands of years, and the memory is coming back.
Right.
And we are getting back in touch with the idea that we, as the indigenous people of this land, we have something to offer the world. We have wisdom that was almost wiped out because, kind of like your people, we face genocide, which is different than war, by the way. A lot of people, there's lots of wars, and a lot of people get wiped out and bad things happen. There's even wars in, areas like LA. You've got gang wars. I mean, wars are wars, but there's really a difference between war and somebody really wanting to remove a race of human beings. And that's what happened here.
Yeah.
So it's a very different thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of the tribes now were regaining our culture. And because of that, because we are a sovereign nation, we are able to do things like have casinos, we can build things. But even with that, there's very few, I'd say, true entrepreneurs in what we refer to as Indian country, because there's been so much fear that the government's going to come in and take everything.
Really?
Yeah, even to this day, we fight for our sovereignty daily.
What does that mean?
So sovereignty is, and you'll appreciate this, is that when the federal government set up the reservations, it was set up because you had a group of people that were not willing to 100% let go of their traditions and their sovereignty. And so there were all these battles, and eventually the government said, look, you guys have a couple of options here. One, we'll give you a buyout. A lot of Native people, and we're talking across the United States, took a check or took a piece of land or took something, and they let go of their tradition. They became Americans, if you will. So they lost their identity as a Native person for whatever reason. Some of the groups of people said, no, we're not going to do that. So the federal government said, well, here's this piece of land. Most of the time it wasn't land anybody would want. It was out in the middle of nowhere. It certainly wasn't coastal land that we were used to. And the federal government said, okay, you set up your own government system. You can have this land, but you will not have all of the infrastructure that a city has.
Right.
So you're not getting anything. You don't have a fire department. You don't have your streets paved. We're not dealing with your electrical. This is all on you. You want to keep your own culture together? Here's this piece of land. Figure it out.
No property taxes.
No property taxes. You set up your own. So that's what's called sovereignty.
But what does that mean? Does that mean that another nation can come in and take over your land?
No, it means that we have we have to have our own government system. It's very similar to the way that, the president, vice president, we have boards basically.
But you're not, what I'm asking you is you're not.
We're a country within a country.
That's what I'm asking. So
that's
another
exactly
country can't come in and fight you.
No, so that's why we call it Indian country, is that the reservations, we have sovereignty. So as Native American, as a card-carrying Native American, which I'm registered with the tribe, we are not technically citizens of the United States.
I understand. Are you protected by the government? That's what I'm asking you. So there was a case in Canada.
Yes and no.
So there was a case in Canada right now, even happening throughout the years, where Montreal, Quebec wanted to become their own country. What happened was that they're afraid to do that. Why? Because they're like, America is just going to come in and take us over. That's what I'm asking. It's like, because you're not technically part of America. Are you?
No, we're not. We're Indian country. We're technically a sovereign nation.
Interesting.
So every reservation has sovereignty. And what that means is when you step onto our reservation, you just lost all your rights as an American citizen. So
all your rights as an American citizen.
You are now under tribal law. Now, does that mean that if you came onto reservation land? Yes, we do. Sure. I have a federal ID.
So when you cross through to Canada or Mexico or wherever, you use that card.
I can. But I also have a driver's license. I can use both. I do pay taxes like everybody else, except for I don't pay state tax because I live on the reservation. But that's what my tribal ID looks like. So the idea behind the reservation is that we have the ability to practice our spiritual beliefs and our cultural beliefs. And that's what sets us apart from the United States, is that we are sovereign in our spiritual beliefs and our ideas. And in that, we've suffered a great amount because, like the rest of the public that had some type of health care, and if there was a fire, the fire department shows up, or if there was some bad thing happened, the police department showed up. When I was a kid on the reservation, there was none of that. So if your house caught on fire, you needed to have your neighbors come over and help you put it out. Now that we have gaming, we have a casino, for the very first time within the last 20 years, we have our own fire department. We pave our own roads. We have our own Indian Health Center. We have built the infrastructure, but a lot of people think we've been given all of that. We have not been given any of that. The only thing that we were given was government rations. When we were so poor, our children were going to starve. We got these boxes, commodity boxes, filled with probably the worst food that a human person should eat, which resulted in a lot of health problems, including a pandemic with diabetes that we're still dealing with to this day, because we introduced these foods that really are not good for anybody to eat. But specifically, when you take people who have lived off of the land and are so healthy, we don't have the ability to metabolize sugar like everyone else because our DNA has not been dealing with that. Processed food, sugar, these types of things are really hard on people who come from an indigenous background because it wasn't too far removed that we were eating right from the land, the healthiest things that you could possibly eat. I actually did a whole documentary about it, about the history of where diabetes happened and how long our Native people lived. I went down to Old Town to the graveyard and took pictures of the tombstones from the Indians, and they were, 110, 100 years old minimum. And then you have them right next to a pioneer that might have been 30 years old. So we had a very long lifespan because we lived off of the land.
Okay, so food, diabetes.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to unpack. As
when you're talking about culture, there's so much to unpack because you're touching on every topic, right? You're touching health, you're touching I get it. There's a lot. Obviously, we won't be able to cover everything on the podcast, but get to know a little bit of you and what you do, and which leads me to the next question, which is the art. How'd you get into that? What's the difference? I want to ask you, what's the difference between Native American art and even the approach to art versus, I don't know, European art?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I got into art because my mother is an artist. So I grew up with, my mother was always painting. She was a hippie from the 60s. My parents met in San Francisco when my dad was an activist at Alcatraz. So they were both, wild hippie kids.
So what do you consider yourself?
So my mother is half Chinese, half Dutch. And then my dad is full native. So I'm a mix.
But when what's your, you're a big advocate, right? You're like, okay, we need to bring these roots back, and it's important to you, right?
It is.
What is your, trying to figure out what your relationship
How do I
is.
identify?
Yeah, I guess so. What is your relationship more towards it than how you identify? Because your DNA, you understand how you grew up, that trying to figure out what your relationship towards that is.
Yeah, I think my relationship is, I would say I'm very much connected with my Native American side. And I think it's because of where I live. I live on the land that my great-grandparents lived on. I live on the reservation. So I am very connected with the vibration of that land.
I see.
And the animals, it's just a really, I think, a special place when you have the opportunity to go back to something that it resonates within your soul, because you know that people have been there for a really long time. And then even in California, I have such a connection to this place because of the great amount of people that have been here.
Right.
So I think that is, and also I think the philosophy of the Native American way of life is to have consideration and gratitude towards every single thing that is outside of what most people think of. When most people think of what really sustains them, they think about the supermarket, the gasoline in their car, these things. And there's some truth to that. But when you really get down to it, what sustains us is the actual earth itself, the dirt. Because without the dirt, we can't grow anything. And if we can't grow anything, we don't exist anymore. And if we don't have water, we also don't exist. So when you think about the things that we should be really grateful for, it's what we walk on every single day and we take for granted. It's the actual, people talk about, planet Earth, Mother Earth. No, and when you really boil it down, we are talking about the ability to eat food. And if we're not grateful and really respectful of the earth that is below our feet, we're missing the whole point of existence. And I feel like we need to, I love nice things. I have a beautiful car, I have a beautiful home. But I think my respect is understanding that what do I really need to have a healthy life? And it's pretty basic.
It's pretty basic. So how does this correlate to art?
So how it correlates to art is, I think the idea behind an artist is understanding that the gifting within somebody's imagination is what is the beginning of art.
Right.
It's not, you can teach technique. It's kind of like if this beautiful piano here, you can teach somebody how to play the piano and they can technically play. But there's a difference when somebody has the gifting within their person.
The feel.
You can listen to two people play, and it's the same thing with art. Art is something that only one person can really successfully do within whatever their genre is. Because that expression, it's like a fingerprint. It could never be duplicated again. So the great artists, whether they're Native American or whether they're European or whatever they are allowing their one signature idea to come through in a visual way that we can all look at it and like it or maybe not like it. But the whole point of it is that it evokes some type of an emotion within us. And that to me is what great art is. It could even be appalling, but the truth is that artists had something within them to bring it out into the real world to see, like an architect does.
Right.
You know, an architect has an idea about how they want to build a building, and it's already done in their mind. Now they just have to get it out there for the rest of us to see.
Right. So do you see a lot of Native American art that is successful when it comes to, like, you know, I'm comparing casinos again, but, you know, successful business-wise? Like, they're able to sell their art, they're able to make a living out of this. Is this something that's actually happening?
It is. I mean, I'd like to see it happen even more. It's a little bit niche in the sense that a lot of the Native artists are creating artwork that has a Native American theme to it. But that's not always the case. There's an artist that has passed away that is actually a family member, and his name is Fritz Scholder. He made a huge impact in the 60s with his art. He made a pretty good living, but I don't think he got rich off of his art. I don't think he cared to either. But recently, he had a painting that just went to auction that sold for $2 million. And so now people are reflecting on not only what he created, but why he created it and what was the message behind it. And I think that's the beauty of art is art has so many different layers. It's not always just what you look at. A lot of times it's the story behind it that can be just as important as what you see. And then when you get that backstory, you see the artwork in a different way. You know, just like listening to music, you could hear a song and it could affect you a certain way. And then you hear from the writer why they wrote the song.
Right.
And now it just blows your mind and you have this completely different view on it,
right,
which changes your whole perspective. And that's what art does.
So where here in San Diego would you say are great galleries or places to go to see some really nice art?
Well, I think the museums are always wonderful because it gives you a ability to look at the past. Right. And to me, I love the Great Masters work. San Diego Museum, you know, our museum at Balboa Park has a very nice collection. Also, the Contemporary Museum. Those are really great. I'd say on just if you want to have a local experience, go to maybe some of the art walks because now you see, you know, these emerging artists and what they're doing. I have a gallery in the Gas Lamp. We represent all internationally acclaimed artists, including we have a very large collection of the art of Dr. Seuss.
Really?
And he lived here in San Diego. So a lot of people know him for the books and he was an illustrator, but not everybody knows that he was an actual painter. And created some incredible works of art just from his own imagination for his own enjoyment.
Interesting. Who are the top, like, would you say, like, currently most trending artists in the Indian art, would you say? Oh,
definitely Jeremy Salazar. Jeremy Salazar is an artist. He's from the Navajo Nation, or we call it Dene, is the actual name of their tribe. One of the larger ones. So I think there's at least a couple 100,000, maybe more, in the Navajo area. And the reason why there's so many of them is because nobody really wanted to go up and take their land because they have no water. It's a tough area to live. So that group of people, they're still pretty strong. And then when you get down to Florida, the Seminole Indians, there's also they're the ones that own the Hard Rock. So and they're industrious.
Right.
They also have a couple of artists there that are pretty well known. Santa Fe, New Mexico is the hub for Indian art. If you ever really want to check out what's happening, I go to Indian Market in August.
Huh. Why there?
It's just everybody comes together. I mean, that's the largest Native American art show in the world.
Oh, wow.
So I think it's the third weekend of August. It's been going on since the 1930s. And what's interesting is in the 1930s, Native Americans were not allowed to go to Santa Fe and show their own work. So you had these white settlers that came and went to the reservations, bought the jewelry and the artwork for pennies on the dollar, and then took it to Indian market and sold it to tourists. So in the 1950s, that shifted. Now it's only Native Americans that can show their work. And you have to be able to prove that. And it's a juried show. But it's a fantastic way to just learn about the culture.
Yeah. I for a while now, I've been talking to business friends of mine, and we're talking about, investing in art. What do you think about that in general?
I think art is an incredible investment. I mean, I've had galleries for, a long time, and I've bought and sold a lot of art. I've had collectors do very well on their investments in art. The key to investing in art is who is the artist, because what makes art valuable is not necessarily what you're seeing there.
Yes.
But it's who is creating it.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, if I had an option to have a tiny little piece of paper with a little scribble on it and then signed by Picasso, or a huge 6-foot oil painting by a decent artist that, maybe is up and coming, I'd choose the Picasso every day because it's Picasso. And that's never going down in value, and it's never going away.
Fascinating how we put value on these things.
Well, a big part of it is it's historical. So when you think about what makes art valuable, it's primarily because it's a historical document. So when we look back at a society, what do we look at? We look at the art, we look at the literature, we look at the architecture. We might look at the music also, but we always assess society based on the arts. That's why you can go into the Met and you can see the Egyptian section or whatever it is, and you go and you say, oh my gosh, this is what they were wearing then. This is what they were painting. And
I understand, but so what are you trying to tell me here? Let me see if I can get it straight. You're saying that it's irrelevant how good the artist today is unless he dies and has a great story. What is that?
In some way I'm saying that, but what I'm saying is that art is something that we can all look at a painting at the same time and have a different assessment of it. So our perspective on art could be different person to person, but what makes art valuable is, did it make an impact historically? And so how does that actually happen in reality is it means people collect it. They bought it. They considered it of value. I mean, even when you look at the Impressionists, they didn't make a lot of money in their lifetimes, but they did have patrons.
So the bottom line is who's willing to pay for that art more than anybody else. And,
yes.
And that's what grows the value.
Yes.
It's
a commodity.
Yes, I see.
Because just like anything, I mean, a diamond wouldn't be worth anything if nobody was willing to buy it.
Right.
But because we all believe that, a diamond is forever and we've been sold that.
But is there art that's not that is subjectively good and has nothing to do with who's willing to pay for it more? I mean, a true critic or analyst of art can say, forget about Picasso for a second, just for the sake of art, analyze the level of quality and intensity and talent in it. You can do that.
You can. And again, it's subjective.
It's subjective still.
It's still subjective.
There's no world agreement on this is fine and this is okay and there's none of that.
It's very much like music.
Oh, wow.
You can listen to music and you can say this is really technically well done, but there's also genres, I'm not a big metal fan, but you could have different types of music that your grandparents would say, this is a bunch of screaming and racket, but yet it's a very famous band and they're doing very well. So again, it goes with the society. What stands the test of time, I think, is really interesting because when you look at history, usually the cream rises to the top, and anything that was really a fad usually falls away. So I think we won't really know, because we won't be here anymore, what really ends up trending long term. Like, for instance, I sold Andy Warhol silk screens when I was in my 20s, and we were selling those for, I think maybe $500 to maybe $5,000. If you had like a rare one, you had a Marilyn. Keep in mind, these weren't originals because he wasn't a painter. He was a photographer, and he did all of these by screening them. He would take photo negatives and then he would screen these. So today, the Marilyn that I sold back in the day, and there were multiples of these, I think the last sale was, 20 million? Something like that. You can't even get your hands on them. And you can't touch a Warhol today for under 100,000. I mean, they're just in such high demand. So what was the difference? People just decided they really liked it. And the history came about, movies came about Warhol, and it started trending. The artwork hadn't changed, but people's belief system in the art had changed.
So what is the role of a gallery here? Can you explain that to me?
So the gallery is there to be the liaison between the collector and the artwork.
So a broker.
Yes, and it's even more than that, because when you think about artists, really great artists, they aren't always the best people to interact with the patrons. A lot of times it's because they're busy, hopefully, and they need to spend that time in the studio creating. But the art dealer or the gallery can really create a platform for people to come in and ask questions and feel comfortable, maybe if they don't know everything they'd like to know about collecting art. Mm-hmm. And then a really good art dealer is also going to ask questions of the patron, such as, what is your idea about collecting art? What's important to you? Mm-hmm. So for some people, they just want something that's pleasing to them, that they connect with emotionally. They're not really interested in investing in anything long term. And in that case, a dealer like myself, I usually will ask them, what is your comfort level financially? Because if you're just buying something, you don't really care whether it goes up in value, you're not giving it to your children, whatever, then just if you have an idea of what's comfortable for you, then I can help facilitate that. Mm-hmm. Well, where I have other patrons that come in and say, I want something that's going to be a tangible asset for me. I want to park my money in something, but I'd also like something that I look at and I'm going to enjoy every day. And then we can set a dollar amount for that. And then I can go to work and try to find something that, start showing that particular collector different artists that I think fit, that are trending. Mm-hmm. So that's what the art dealer, that's the role that we play. And then also a lot of times we're always on the hunt. So for instance, getting original Dr. Seuss, super difficult. I mean, they're so rare that you can almost never find them. And when you do, you have to make sure that the authenticity piece is right, because there's a lot of fakes. Mm. So an art dealer like myself, I know how to authenticate art based on either the source of where I'm getting it from, because I've been doing it a long time, and I can also look at certain works, not all of them, and say, this doesn't seem right. So you have that filter. You have an expert on your side who's really working on your behalf.
I like that. Definitely something I'd be interested in getting into more. Sounds fascinating to me.
I've been doing it a while, so I must like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you tie in right now? For you, where do you see the connection for yourself when it comes to, Native Americans and the land and your art? Where do you see the flow for you? You're like, you know what? I like this. That's what I have going on. What is it?
I feel like I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate for our people. And I'm also a catalyst to allow people who maybe feel white guilt or feel bad of, what happened to, if you're an American, right, and you go back and you're like, oh my gosh, my grandparents came over on the Mayflower or whatever, I don't know the stories, there can be this perception that Native Americans are angry and bitter at the people that took over the land. And there's probably some truth to that with some people. But I feel like here we are, we're all here now. How do we bridge that gap now? And how do we bring in the traditions of our people, not to create a divide, but to create unity, to say, if you really want to know about the land that you're living on today, if you want to be a true American, knowing the true origin of the place that you now call home, you've got to look to the first people that were here and start understanding this rich culture. And maybe you're going to actually learn something as well, and also learn how to maybe take care of the planet so your children can see it one day.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. I think there's a big movement towards already. People are definitely fascinated by it. Yeah. So are they, would you say that I mean, there's Mexico and then there's America. There's a difference.
Well, there's a difference, but we have relatives in Mexico. I mean, I'm not Kumeyaay, but I know a lot of people from the tribes that are here, border towns, and they recognize their Kumeyaay relatives and give support and help, because obviously that's not part of the United States, so that's not going to be a reservation. And some of them are having a lot of times, really hard times financially. So a lot of the tribes will give to their relatives. These are
so relatives. There is a charity concept.
Oh, absolutely.
Or being, I see, across borders.
Cross borders, because they're still our relatives. Right.
Tell me more about the culture. I'm curious. Is there like some kind of I mean, there were, obviously before America, before this government, you had your own laws and regulations and this and that. What is the differences, would you say? Somebody steals. How do they deal with somebody who's a thief? I'm just curious.
Well, I don't really know, because I don't really think that we had a government system. We had a tribal community. And so I think people were dealt with personally. It wasn't, these nations, again, you don't have a leader.
But there's some philosophy behind it. Like you said,
yes.
The philosophy is, for example, grounded to the earth, right? Which means, hunter-gatherers or they moved around, right? Okay, that creates a certain dynamic, right? They're living in smaller communities. There should be probably some kind of a leader of a tribe.
Well, and the society in general was a matriarchal society, because the men were hunter-gatherers. The women held the space of the really taking care of the community as the teachers, as the government leaders, as the medicine women.
And where does the shaman come in?
And a lot of the shaman were women.
Oh, really?
Were the spiritual teachers. We also had a belief in two spirits. That meant if a child was born what we would consider gay, or even having feminine or masculine tendencies, that was actually considered a gifting, that you had that sensitivity.
Interesting, yeah.
And so, we had a very different way. But I think the difference is that there were small tribes, small groups of people, families, that moved and worked together. And so there wasn't the need for one person to have a hammer everybody understood the laws of nature.
Right.
And so within the laws of nature, it's what you put out is what you get back. And there was also an incredibly high respect for human beings in general. So I think a lot of the breakdown in society comes when we are not respectful of each other.
Yeah.
We also don't listen to each other and the giftings that we have. A lot of times, even as parents, we try to make our children become something that they're not. And I'm not talking about gender.
Yes,
that could be part of it, but it could also be that, I want my son or my daughter to, be a doctor. Well, maybe their gifting is they're a baker, and that's what they're going to give to the world. And that's what their passion is. In the Native culture, we're very respectful because we're very connected with each other. And we know that everybody has something to give. And I think that's something in our society, because we have this pyramid idea. We feel that the people on the top are more valuable than the people on the bottom. So what does the top represent? It represents money and fame. So if you have a lot of money and you're famous, it's really interesting. All of the fashion ideas are now pointing towards you. So you see even things like within the Kardashian era, all these women wanting big butts, big lips, big boobs. And you wonder why, where did that come from? Well, let's see who's on the top right now. And you have this Kardashian family with money, with fame, and all these young girls are saying, I want to be valuable. If I look like that, I could be valuable too. And this is historic. You've got the Victorian era. It doesn't matter. And this is global. So when you get away from the sensitivity within a community unit, now you are forcing ideas on people. And really, the sad part of it is we are not benefiting from the gifting that every single human being has. And the fact that when somebody is born into this world, we will never have another one like them ever again. It's a complete impossibility. And so we need to get back to the way that the tribes were, of really trying to encourage and extract every talent, because we need it on the planet. And that's the Native way.
So you touched on a point that, try to connect to the older ways. Now, it is very difficult to do that on a major scale of an economy and a system that's so huge. So I would say we can't change that. But what we can do possibly is take some of the values, take some of the concepts and the, understanding how important, for example, grounding is. Right? I'm not talking about just standing on the ground. I'm talking about the whole concept of you being part of the earth, like you said, part of nature and all this this concept. Okay, how do we take that and apply it in our daily life? Because we're not going to, this is a massive beast. You're not going to just break it down. It's not, it's just not going to happen. So how do you, I don't want to say tame the beast or soften the beast or improve the beast, but, what do you, which some things would you say, on a daily or on a conscious level, people could do more of? What do you think?
I think the most important thing is we can only affect ourselves.
Right.
So we have to start with ourselves. And whatever area of influence you've been given, it's important to think about the other person. I think it's pretty common. It's not a wisdom, I guess, that I'm thinking this is like really out there. Everybody knows that they would like to be respected. So for instance, I own several businesses, and whenever I'm having to work with an employee, or I like to say a team member that works with me, not for me, just even that language.
Right.
When people say, that person works for you, I'm like, no, they work with me. Because I want to have a circular leadership. I don't want to have people working for me, which elevates my position. I want them to work with me. And so within working with me, my goal as an employer is to extract the talent from them.
It's funny you say that.
And try to listen to where I see things are working. And when things are not working, and I need to sit down and have those hard conversations, I want to come from a space that it starts with I'm encouraging them for the things that they do really well, and maybe pulling away things that just are not their wheelhouse, or coaching them on things that I think that they could get better at, without just having a knee-jerk reaction that I'm the boss, this is just the way it's going to be. And that's what it is, which in a lot of ways is really disrespectful to another human being. So the idea is, if my goal is to build a really strong business, I have to build really strong people.
Yes, very difficult to do though.
And how do I do that? I do that by respecting them first, because how can I expect somebody to want to work in a team environment together to produce something if they don't feel respected?
Right. Well, okay.
And this also goes for, I have a daughter. I have an 18-year-old daughter. And it's easier actually when you have employees. And the idea is that you walk home and,
Yeah, I get it.
When you have children, that's when you really get tested, because that is the time where the listening is so crucial. We want to demand and teach and say it's my way or the highway. But the reality is we, again, are not encouraging our children then to think. Because if the parents are just telling them, this is what I told you to do it and let's do it, it doesn't encourage the child to have problem solving.
Right.
And maybe to try things and fail, which is part of life.
But you don't separate the two? I mean, the business is a business, a home is a home, or do you think it's just across the board?
It's just all one life. I don't separate my business life from my personal life or work from play or anything. It's just all one life. There's no separation. And so every day I wake up and I approach it as just such an incredible opportunity to be here and to serve. And that's where I come from. What is it that I'm supposed to give to this day? What talents am I supposed to pour out? I mean, I really feel that if everybody wakes up each day, instead of saying, what do I get? What is it that I'm here to give? Because ultimately, we all know the end game. We know we don't get out alive. We have a very short commercial.
Speak for yourself.
Maybe, unless somebody comes up with something else. But the truth is it's a beautiful, I call it the commercial. We have this little commercial, which we call our lives. It's very short. And in that, the whole idea for us here on this plane is to contribute and to learn and to experience.
Right.
And so the best way to learn is to ask yourself, what do I have to give? And that to me is a global consciousness that should come forth, not just a Native American or any culture. We as human beings have been brought to this planet for the short time as a one of one. We are the only ones that will ever exist who are us. This DNA code, the spirit that's within us. This is it. And so if we don't really value ourselves and think, how fabulous is it that I'm the only one here? And then really delve in and say, gosh, if I'm the only one here, that means that I have things that I'm the only one that can give.
Yes.
How fantastic is that? Great. And so then wouldn't you want to wake up every day and say, I'm here. I've got things to give. So here I am, and I'm willing to do that. And I think that, to me, would be a shift in mentality.
Yes, I can see that. Yeah. The question is, how do people find, I guess that's the question of purpose and what people's gifts are. And I think I meet a lot of people that I find that they don't have, their claim is like, I don't have talents, or I don't know what I'm good at or what I should, So
I think it can come from laziness, because some people,
Right.
It takes a lot to put yourself out there. You have to be strong and courageous and not be afraid of ridicule or what other people are going to think. And then also, I think the other side is it can come from an idea that you've lived your life without having anybody encourage you. If you take a baby and you never pick it up, science has shown that you can feed and take care of a baby, but it never gets any love. It will die like within the first year. It's just the weirdest thing. Same with the plant. If you don't tend to it. So a lot of people have not come from a place where they've had a lot of tending to and a lot of encouragement. And so those people, they need to really get back in touch with who they really are.
Gotcha.
because we all are somebody special. I really believe that. You know, I think I've never met a human being in my life.
Have you tried any, what's the shaman stuff that they do?
In South America they use ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca
here.
And that
they use peyote here. I've done probably every drug imaginable, but not lately, not for a very long time. But
did you see any benefits? That's the question.
I think probably when I was younger, you know, I did the psychedelic mushrooms, and I think probably I had some awakenings, but I don't really feel like I need any awakenings. I feel like I'm so spiritually in touch.
You feel you were always that way?
I feel like I've always been that way, but as I've gotten older, I'm way more aware. Like, I don't need any enhancement. I am so plugged in to what is going on with my ancestors and where I'm supposed to be. And it's primarily because I ask every single day. You know, I wake up every day and I have a conversation with who I don't even know who it is, or I mean, I don't need to. I'm well beyond trying to figure out, is this, you know, God, Allah, Jesus, who is it? It doesn't matter to me because it's not
your higher self. You're speaking to
my higher self. It could be my ancestors. I don't know. And you know, the beauty of not knowing is it gives me the freedom to tap in even more, because I don't have to define what it is. All I know is this. Is that it's magic.
So your advice would be that?
Yes, I ask every morning. I have a little conversation and I say, all right, you know, I ask the spirit, I say, okay, you know, here we are. It's another day that I'm here. So open up the doors, show me where I need to be. Give me the wisdom, give me the intuition. Help me to not be so busy that I don't miss things. I don't miss opportunities on the way. So because I align myself in the morning.
How does a person do that?
You ask.
But I know. You say it simply. It's like a person says, you play. I mean, how does a person actually do that? Mentally, what do they need to open up to feel like?
What I do is I get by myself. I don't need that long. It's not a ritual. It's just I am open to the outside forces that I cannot see with my five senses. I cannot touch, I cannot taste, but I've seen this energy field. I don't even know what you would call it.
Right.
But what my intention is that I want to be utilized as this one spirit being in this physical plane. I want to be utilized for the best good, because that's what I'm here for. And I know that if I'm doing that, I'm going to be the most satisfied too, because that's what I'm designed to do. It's like if you have a plant that's growing, it has an idea of why it's growing whatever it's growing. It's growing a piece of fruit. And that fruit has an idea of what it would like to do. That's why it does what it does. And we all have these byproducts of our lives.
So what would you say to somebody, which I hear this argument a lot, people who are living in the Western world in general would say, listen, all this juju stuff, it sounds great. Then I have to get back to my real life, pay the bills, do the things that I need to do, deal with children and a wife and a husband and a boss and this and that. It doesn't correlate for me, because this is all nice. And then I go into the real world and man.
It's a good question. And here is the question I'd ask somebody. How's that going for you? How happy are you feeling? Are you feeling like you're making a difference in the world? Do you feel like you're important? Do you feel like you have purpose? Or do you feel like you're a rat on a wheel? Because if you feel like you're a rat on the wheel and you're just trying to pay the bills and keep moving forward, and there's no joy and there's no peace and there's no harmony within yourself, then you need to understand that there's more than that. You're not just here to pay taxes and to pay bills. You're here for a greater purpose. And the only way you can find that is you've got to slow down and ask for outside assistance. Sure. You need to get in touch with your purpose of being here. Now, does that mean you're not going to be a mom or pay bills or go to work? but you will have a different perspective, because once you open up your mind that there's more than the day-to-day of what's happening, that's when the magic happens. That's when opportunities appear. That's where things happen that you cannot take responsibility for it.
Right.
You cannot say, oh, I made that thing happen because I was grinding it out. No, you just meet somebody. And maybe you hated your job, and the next thing you know, you've got this other opportunity.
So you're saying just be a vessel.
Yes, and allow for there to be more to life than what you've been, you learned on TV about this is what it's supposed to be. Right. Who says that? Why is it supposed to be like that?
Are there some things that are in the Native American community in general, or as a people, that you would say, you know what? If we could change or remove a few things in the way the government and the systems are set up here, or like property tax or certain type of taxes or whatever, what is their perspective on that? Because again, different lifestyles before to now. What would they remove? What would they say? We don't need that, or we need more of this, or what do you think that would be? If you had the general consensus, what do you think would be?
Within the reservations, or just in general?
In general, if you look at it from the Indian perspective, from that culture, from that lifestyle, and say, you know what, we don't like how they're doing this thing in this government, in this system.
Where do we start?
Yeah, well, name some top 5.
Well, I would say, the main thing is that this government system is set up as a monarchy. We think it's a free world here in the United States.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not.
No.
and the thing about it is it didn't erode to become this. This was the original plan. This was the original design. You had a lot of people that had a lot of money.
I'm not trying to be devil's advocate here.
From Europe. No, it's true. This is if you really look at
why
the
is
names.
That bad?
Well, because once again, you are setting up a system where some people are more valuable than others. And so this...
Aren't they?
Absolutely not.
For certain things. I'm asking for certain, don't you think
yes,
so?
No,
if I have I don't know, 5 gardeners, and one of the gardeners is, I value more, I pay more, just a card. I pay him more because I think he's more valuable.
Right.
Isn't that how it works?
Well, yes and no. You can have 5 gardeners that one actually is better at what they do, but if a system is set up that's somebody's only option, maybe their talents lie somewhere else. Mm-hmm. People could be lazy too. That's part of life as well. But what I'm saying is that when you have set up a country and a system that there is just no way that most people will ever get to a place where they don't have to stress out every single day about just putting food on the table, you've got a problem. That means that some people have taken advantage of other people, and they are taking more than their fair share. So when the colonies came over to the United States, they were sold a bill of goods. Because think about it. How do you get people from Europe to take a boat for how many days? And you tell them before they even leave, look, most of you aren't going to survive this trip. But when you get there, you're coming to the free world. And what does that mean? That means you're going to have free land. You're going to have the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and no taxes. So here we are today, not even 300 years later. Who gets a piece of free land? Who doesn't pay taxes? You barely have the freedom of speech. If you're speaking about certain things, you could maybe get shut down. Religion depends on which religion you are. You could find your synagogue, bombed in the land of the free. So the point that I'm making is that this government system is extremely flawed, and it really boils down to this one thing. People are born into the United States with a target on their back, meaning that you've got insurance companies betting for how long you're going to be alive. You've got the FDA with these drug companies that bury drugs that can actually help people because they're betting on you getting cancer and how much the insurance company is going to make over your lifetime. The whole thing is set up so people can make money off of people. So when you have that type of mentality, people have no value. They're just a cog in the wheel. And that is the problem that I see in general. So it takes a really unique individual to be able to rise up out of that and say, you know what? I do have value. I am going to ask for outside help. I am going to connect spiritually, and I'm going to navigate on this plane so that I can contribute and I don't have to live in fear every single day. And I
thought that was the system that whoever, not, it used to be where one person would be able to be the farmer, this or that. Now we're separating. We're saying, okay, this person is the farmer, this is the dentist, this is that, and everybody excels in their field. I mean, isn't that the system of capitalism?
Well, not necessarily, because a lot of people, even if they wanted to be a farmer, they're not. We really have not set people up to be able to do that. Most people are working these days in some level for the government. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. If you look at the different industries, sooner or later, they're either providing something as a service or a good for the people. But in many times, that's all taxed by the government. Like, I have a gallery downtown. I'm a tax collection center. When you come in to buy a piece of artwork from me, I collect, for every work of art, I collect 7.75% of tax that I don't see a dime of. It costs me money to collect it because I have to get an accountant to make sure we do it right, all these things. Yeah. And I have to get that to the government by the end of the month, or else they will shut me down or they'll fine me, all of those things. So every single business that you see in existence is a tax collection center.
Yes.
So we all work for the government.
Yes.
Every single person pays taxes. Every single business that's created eventually is working for the government.
Okay, let's narrow it down. So you're saying remove all taxes? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that we need to start removing. We need to have more local community government. So if the infrastructure for a city was just based on that city, in other words, the city of San Diego, we weren't paying money to the federal government. Everything was done locally. We'd have a lot more ability to manage the funding that came through. And we would also, this is in theory, right? Because people could be corrupt. But we would also not have to work in a way where we have these federal laws that come. We could have more local community ideas about what best serves that community. If we have the ocean, maybe we need to have more money to cleaning that up. If we live in Texas, we don't have any ocean. Maybe they have to deal with things like the, outpouring of what's happening with the fracking, and they need to deal with taking care of the land. It's just, it's very idealistic.
Right.
So I'm not saying that it could ever actually happen, but the bigger you allow government or individuals to oversee a monarchy,
right,
people become less and less valuable. That's just the way it works. And so back to this tribal community idea, this is why we have been here for 23,000 years successfully without wars and we haven't had wars on this land. There's been fights between Native nations but there hasn't been wars because people lived peacefully within communities. And again, when you look at the communities globally, the indigenous communities before large leadership came in by the ways of the monarchy was really a beautiful way of life.
How do you deal with it today? So when you say you're living in smaller tribes, I mean, the thing is you have many cultures here, many cultures. And they're all in little, Chinatown, India, like they're all in little pockets. And they have different cultural perceptions of how things should be. The only thing that's keeping them in line is the government saying, this is our rules and regulations, called the American way, whatever. So you can do your cultural stuff, but on the road here, you have to follow our rules.
Well, I think that's a larger conversation, but I think mostly what separates people culturally is religion. The idea of that my way is right and your way is wrong. And I think
that's a big problem. This is a conversation I've been having, which is a very important one, because there's obviously a lot of value in the different religions. They've been around for thousands of years, so they have a lot of information that we can use. But at the same time, there's a lot of nonsense that we need to remove. So where do you, like I'm sure like Native Indians, they find a lot of value in today's world, right? It's not like they
absolutely. We have an iPhone.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a fine line to figuring out this whole thing, of course.
I think it will all figure itself out eventually. I mean, that's the beauty of the planet is the planet will always be here. We cannot destroy it. We may not be here, but we can't destroy it. It would be so arrogant for us to think. Even if there was a nuclear war and the whole place got blown up, the Mother Earth would repair itself.
Right.
The animals would come back. I mean, look at what happened in COVID when we just got off the roads. All the animals came back. It won't take long.
It won't take long, yeah.
And so that we do know. The question is how can we live harmoniously together?
Yes.
And how do we live within the guides of nature? Because without nature, we don't survive anymore.
Yes. So I had this conversation with people. You've been to Hawaii. You've been to Maui, right? Where you have one side that looks like Switzerland and the other side looks like a jungle because, they brought all these trees and they built this jungle. So, and I'm telling people in San Diego, I was like, this is how San Diego didn't look like this. They didn't have palm trees. Most of these plants were brought in here, right? So do you see that the native population, the Indians in general feel like, we should go back to the original nature, or should we? What do you think is the perspective on nature and it, bringing new species in and changing, habitats and all that? What have you been hearing?
Where I live at Rincon, we're in one of the larger agricultural areas in San Diego in the Palma Valley. And the main, fruit that's grown there are oranges. And those came in from the Spaniards. So oranges are not indigenous to North America, but we do really well with them. I mean, all of the tribes grow citrus and a lot of other things. So I think that at this point, it's like you can't change. You're not going to go backwards. And I don't think native tribes feel like you can go backwards and make things what they once were. We all are, we're in a series of evolution as human beings. However, within that evolution, there are rules that govern the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to jump off of a roof, and you don't believe in gravity, you're going to find out that you may not believe in it. Okay. But you're still going to land like, like a rock. Yes. So there are certain things within that I think are principles like respect of the planet, respect of each other, things that I think we can get back to that are actually quite simple. The fact that we may have differences in religion and we may have differences in religious teaching, but for the most part, there are more similarities than differences. Respecting our elders, taking care of our elders. I mean, all of these things.
That is big in the community, right?
It's huge. Like we do not put our elders in a rest home.
You don't?
No, I mean,
really?
I'm not saying never.
Even if it's a luxury one?
Yeah, even if they're driving you nuts, right? No, that's part of our culture is that we don't. I mean, obviously, if somebody is so ill, you can't take care of them at home, but not to just go, I can't stand my mom. You know, she's getting older. Let's go find a home for her. That's unheard of.
But the parents themselves, is there a movement to wanting to go into these nice? None, really.
No, they just want to make us crazy. Because their parents made them crazy too. So this is just how we do it. But what I'm saying is that I think there's so many larger problems that we cannot you and I can't, figure it all out. But what we can figure out is how do we raise our children and how are we being utilized with our one lives in the community that we live in? And how do we affect that? Because it doesn't take that much to change everything. We think that it's got to be monumental. Sometimes it's just having the care for a human being that never had it before. And fast forward 50 years and you were a catalyst to helping that person change the world. So you just never know. I mean, we can only affect our space, but I think it really comes down to respect.
So the biggest advice would be to anybody looking for their way or whatever you want to call that is to speak to...
Ask.
Pray, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah, pray, ask the things ask the spirits, however you want it. Maybe you only believe in one spirit or for me personally, I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of different groups of people. Maybe they're my ancestors. I mean, the Bible talks about that. I'm not,
it's universal.
Not
the concept is universal.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible has a scripture that talks about we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses.
Right.
In the book of Hebrews and in faith, this faith walk.
Right.
Faith is the substance of things that you haven't seen, the assurance that they're coming. That's all spirituality is. It's believing that there's something that you're supposed to be doing daily and you don't know what it is maybe, and you don't even see it, but you're assured that you're going to do something good. And you're asking for that wisdom on that journey and on that path that when it's all said and done and you're on your deathbed, you could look back at your life and say, you know what? I was really instrumental on this planet. I gave something while I was here. And when you think about it, I personally believe that that's where the most satisfaction comes. I don't think it's anybody's going, well, what I really loved about being here is I got that new Ferrari and I got that hot chick or that hot dude. I don't think people look at their lives when it's all said and done about what they got. I think more people look at their lives as what did I give?
You mentioned that you think it's extremely valuable for any individual, to speak to the higher consciousness or spirits or whatever you want to call that, because it's just part of I would say that it's a part of our DNA. I think it's across religions, across cultures, it's just there. I don't care if you're an atheist, agnostic, is irrelevant. What's relevant is it exists. And so your claim is like, whether you believe or don't believe, there's a value there that's helpful for you. Speak to whoever, your higher self, your consciousness, whatever spirits. Okay, do that because that's going to lead you to a clarity in life and a vision. And maybe you're not aware of where you're going, but be a vessel. These concepts are universal, right?
They are.
They're universal, yes.
Well, when you think about in our native culture, we have the medicine wheel, which is the balance. It's all 4 of the quadrants of the planet. We have 4 plant medicines. We have our different animals that represent that. But it also represents the different parts of who we are. So we all know that we have a physical body and we have our minds. So when you think about it, if you if your mind, if your brain, put it that way, your brain, your cognitive ability to have a thought, and that brain controls a lot of things. If you got into a bad accident and you got brain dead, you could probably live on life support. Your physical body could live without the brain. You wouldn't probably know anything, right? And the flip side is true. Somebody could get paralyzed and their brain could work and their physical body could not work anymore, right? But they could communicate and maybe even do whatever, write a book, whatever the modern technology allows, even though they physically couldn't live. Right. Their body couldn't work. But there's even a higher source than that, and that's our spirit. And a lot of times we don't recognize our spirits at all. We just think we're a brain and we're a body. We walk through this world thinking about things and physically doing things, but there's actually another part of who we are, and that's our spirit. That's the life force. Mm-hmm. That's the energy that fuels both the brain and the physical body. And a lot of times we don't really have any type of communication in the spirit world through our spirit. And
I guess this is the challenge that the scientific community, or so anybody who's approaching life through strictly that lens, having a difficulty with, right? Because they can't measure it, or they don't try to measure it. I don't know. Do you see what I mean? They can't. They don't like. To them, it sounds like juju. What is spirit? What is soul? How do I see? How do I feel it? What is it?
But yet, when you look at, you may not be able to measure or see it, but you can see it in people's lives. You take somebody like Tesla. If you read about his life, he was very spiritually connected. As a matter of fact, he believes that all of the things that he learned came from somewhere outside of him. So where is that outside of him?
Most artists feel that way, right?
Right? And artists and a lot of people who invented things.
Yes.
I think a lot of the quantum leaps that we've made in technology have a lot to do with the spirit world. And so just because we can't see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, doesn't make it not so. And we're finding, science will tell you that there's a whole world that we can't see with our eyes that holds everything together. Yeah. And so all of these things, to me, I just tell people the proof is in the pudding. So when you ask for wisdom and you take a minute to put yourself out there and really ask and try to commune with whether it's your ancestors or it's God or it's the spirit or whatever you want to call this life force that's outside of this realm, and you start seeing it at work, you don't need anybody to tell you whether it is or it isn't, because you're experiencing it.
Yeah. Very valid point. This was a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
I feel aligned.
Good.
I feel grounded.
It's something
That's awesome.
All I can say is that there's more to life than meets the eye.
Yeah.
And when you start tapping into the wonder of why you're here and really delving into what is it that I have to give to the planet, your whole life changes because it feeds. It's not a one and done. You open up this window of possibility, and then that's where living really gets fun, is you start to realize that I'm not a slave here. I'm not a cog in the wheel. I'm a contributor. And then once that starts happening, it's on.
Powerful, indeed. Ruth-Ann Thorn. Okay, thank you for coming. Truly appreciate it. Great company, great conversations. Hopefully we can do this again.
I hope so. It's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you.